Morning, everyone. Welcome back to car sketching. I've got my drawing already decided, the subject I want to do a master drawing copy, and that is a Michelangelo piece. So the first thing I do is I use my measuring tool, and you can use anything. As I've said before, you can take measurements with your fingers and your pencil, whatever it is. I just happen to like this tool, so I'm just going to take some basic measurements. I'm not going to talk as much in this video because I feel like it gets very repetitive when I watched it back. And you can leave your comments in the comments section if you think I should be doing more or less talking. I can tell you that if you tell me less talking, it's something I've heard before, all growing up. So I'm just taking some basic measurements about where his head occurs, about where these elbows are. I want to make sure I fit this main part of the drawing on the page without running out of paper, since this is a very small sketchbook. So this is where his head would be. And this is about where his elbows would be. So I'm just doing some general measurements. And I'm going to start. I'm just going to jump right in. Well, first I want to get an idea about how big the head is. It's funny, that's one of the things that you can really make a mistake on. A tiny head or a big head will look strange, so you want to make sure you get that right. And the head's a lot bigger than I thought it would be at first glance. And it always tells me how important it is to grab these measurements, because it's just a good check. So this is the width of the head. Again, I'm not sure I would have hit that right on. So I'm going to take the guide of my measuring tool and do that. Now this hand, I want to make sure I get that, because a hand can throw you off too, especially, looks like this guy's head is quite small compared to the hand, but I'm going to trust that Michelangelo knows what he's doing there. So I'm kind of looking at where this measurement is from where the hand hits to where this bottom of the wrist is. You see it's much lower than I originally thought. So here's the top of the hand. Here's the bottom of the wrist. So just two little dots will kind of get me where I'm going on that. And I realize I'm using an HB pencil, which I don't want to be doing. I'm not sure why I always make that mistake, but I always grab a much darker pencil than I should be for these early stages. This is an F, or a 2H is fine. I just find sometimes a 2H can damage paper that is pretty flimsy, and this is pretty flimsy drawing paper. So I'm just going to throw in these basic measurements of the hands, but I'm not going to get too specific. I'm going to just get a little more blocky with it and just get the basic shape idea in case I have to make some adjustments. I won't have a lot of wasted time. And then we're going to throw this. I want to make sure I get the angle of this right. You can see that the angle, sometimes it helps to put your pencil up to get a true picture of what that angle should be. And I think if I hadn't done that, I probably would have drawn it too straight up and down, when in fact I really want this elbow to come this far. So I'm just drawing the basic shape of his muscle, his arm muscle, and I know from my measurement line that I shouldn't go much farther than this for the width. And You see, everything leads to something else. I wouldn't go and start to draw over here because I don't have anything to measure against. But here I know the wrist is supposed to be here, or pretty damn close. So I know that the wrist is about that thick, or pretty damn close. And so then I can just gauge, okay, so the muscle comes out of this area right here, makes this V shape. And so I'm just cruising around here, grabbing basic measurements without any kind of a tool or measuring tool, because I'm using my drawing as a guide now of where things occur next to other things. So it's a pretty dramatic elbow. I wouldn't have imagined that the elbow would have had, you know, such a dramatic shape there. And then something that I probably would have messed up is that, wow, his shoulder is coming up really high into his head. So I want to make sure I capture that. And his shoulder, actually, it's a very subtle shape. So I'm just going to throw that in there, and it meets up with that. That's good enough there on that side. I want to make sure I jump around a little bit more now. So I'm going to skip over to here, and you'll see that this side is a little lower than that side. So I'm going to make sure I go up a little higher here, and I'm going to begin doing my shoulder on this side, and always keeping in mind that I don't want to go much past there, which is one of my critical measurements. And I'm going to throw in his very muscular shoulder here, and I'm going to move down his arm. I know that his other elbow needs to come about there. I'm going to take one more quick measurement with my hand to see if I'm still good, and I am. So I'm going to throw that in there, and this is his long part of his arm right here, which will kind of lead to his elbow here. And I want to make sure I have sort of a similar shape from here to here, enough space, and it looks pretty good. I could back this up a little bit where the elbow is. So now we've got a basic shape here, and now I'm kind of looking over here to say, okay, about how wide should that be? And that looks about right, but I'm not only looking at how wide, I'm looking at how high up that is, and it leads about where that wrist, it's even with that wrist. So you're always measuring with your eyes, even if you're not using a tool. So I don't like the way I made that really dark, and it's distracting, so I'm just kicking it back with my kneaded eraser. So this is the eraser that is sort of self-cleaning when you pull it, and it's indispensable. Honestly, it's, besides a pencil, it's the other thing you really need when you're drawing. But I mean, they're cheap. Gotta have it. So he's got a very thick arm, so I'm going to kind of get this muscle in here so I can make sure that it's wide enough. I think probably on this video, in order to keep it somewhat short in length, I just probably want to get the basic outline done of everything, and then I'll do part 2 to get more of the details. Sometimes I start drawing in a little shading so that I can lead from one shape to another, like that. But I'm going to, you know, bail on the shading at some point to make sure I address the rest of the drawing. You can see down here it gets really dark under his chin area. So I'm going to feel pretty safe to kick that back with just some simple line work to get some color in there. But I also want to remind myself that there's a lighter area here, so I'm just going to throw that in by doing some cross hatching where it meets up with this arm. And then speaking of that arm, I want to kind of throw in this crease here because it's an important one. And that's good there. Now this is important because it shows the width of his body from here to here. So I'm going to grab that measurement. It goes right about here. It almost meets up with his arm, but is really actually connected to his elbow. So that's about all you see of that. So I'm only going to draw that. And then this, God, this looks like a creature or something creeping around. He'll be fun to draw later. So now I'm going to look at under his elbow right here and get the area of where his crotch would be. Kind of cascades down like this. So it's about like this, and it's kind of lined up with his elbow. So this looks about right to me. But I'm not going to get too specific until I start running up in here to make sure I have this part. So now what I'm addressing is here. Looks like that little bit of muscle occurs right here. And this one is quite large. It's probably his stomach area. It comes down like this. A little bit of shading just to... Sometimes, as I've mentioned in past videos, sometimes I throw the shading in just to keep my interest in the drawing, because it really creates a lot of volume when you put shading in, and it's more interesting to me than just the line work. So I try to throw it in some areas right from the beginning without getting too detailed, because you want to make sure you get everything in the right place before you start doing a ton of shading. So right now I'm kind of drawing within his leg to make sure I have enough of that muscle in there. And this, I want to make sure I get this angle here. You see how this angle, I'm using the pencil again to get a general angle. I want to make sure I get that angle right, where it's really kind of heading in this direction. And it might be time to take a quick measurement here from that area to, let's make sure we get from there to there, from there to there, so I know it's about here. And then I think there's like a little sideways area, which is here, and this shows a little dent in this muscle right here. And then it continues to go this way, and it goes in right there. Now I want to make sure that I have that measurement correct. So I'm going to grab from the area of his crotch right to the area where it dents in, because that's a really long measurement, and if I draw it too long, which clearly I have, it could look weird. So I'm going to just put a little dark area here, so I know I should not come down farther than here. And it's funny, just that one little mark can really save you a lot of grief. Whenever you have the opportunity to grab a long measurement and double check, you want to do it. So for instance, here to here would be considered a very long measurement that would create an issue in your drawing. But from here to here, not so much. I mean, I don't think your eye would pick up if I was off on that a little bit. So that's the inside of the leg. And then, you know, I'm just really catching this shaded part here, which leads to his muscle here. And I'm going to go back up now, and I'm going to grab what's happening here on his side. There's a lot of quick changes here, which might help me to do the measuring by eye. So right here, I'm under here. Could be making that a little too big. We'll see. I'm comfortable with it at the moment. And then we start drawing his leg. I want to make sure I get his mass right, though, because Michelangelo's figures are very muscular. So again, I'm going from the crotch area, and I'm going to get to the outside of the leg. So crotch area to the outside of the leg. So I actually seem to be about right, so I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to scoop this in here. And this is about where his knee is going to occur, right here. Sometimes I'll draw, you know, a basic line like this to kind of remind me about where the knee occurs. And sometimes I'll even let the shading, you know, be my guide on what looks good, where the knee should drop down. And it gets very dark over here, so I'm gonna throw that in. I don't like the way my pencil just moved there, so I'm gonna be a little fussy and get rid of that wobbly line. It's important too when you do your line work not to have all your lines look the same. It's good to have like a little dark area and then disappear and then begin again. It just you let your viewer sort of fill in what's missing. It makes the drawing a lot more interesting. So I'm just going to draw a little bit of shading in here to capture some of this volume. And now I'm going to grab the outer side of his body over here. I feel like this is a little thin, so I'm going to grow it a little bit here. Right now I'm looking at this pretty impressive leg muscle. Michelangelo liked his boys muscular, sure enough. Who doesn't, right? Alright, so I'm going to throw that in here. So I know that that creature is going to intersect his body right about here. I think I'm actually drawing that way too big. So it's funny how your eye doesn't really catch, you want to do this big beak, and then you actually go and look at it and say, oh, it's just coming over that much. I want to make sure I don't over-exaggerate and get the proportions wrong on that. So I'm going to leave that for now, and I'm really going to just concentrate on his figure. This comes out about here. Even if I'm not sure of where I'm at, I just kind of skip over and get to where I do feel sure of where I'm at. Again, we're going to drop down and get some of this knee action where it starts to get shadowy. And I'm going to look at where this comes in. Aha, so where that is a little dark area, my first measurement, that's about where the knee starts dropping down, and we go to some shading here. And my clip is kind of in the way. I might be able to scoot by it. So now I'm just jumping from muscle to muscle, which is kind of fun to do. And I know that all of this stays pretty dark, so throwing in some darkness here and just grabbing some of these really cool muscle shapes. There's kind of an interesting circular shine right here that I'm trying to get on his body, and then this is quite dark over here. Work on his elbow area, which leads up to this muscle. And I'm constantly looking at my reference material. I'm probably looking at my reference material more than I'm actually looking at my drawing, which takes a while to get the hang of that. I think where people, beginning artists, make their mistake is that they just don't look up and check their drawing enough. They get sucked into their own drawing and they start believing what they're drawing without checking it, and then one mistake kind of compounds against another, and before you know it, you've got all this work into the drawing, and you know there were things that should have been corrected right from the beginning. So I'm gonna grab this finger area because it will help me measure what's happening with the rest of the hand. It's got a little gap between these fingers that I want to capture. And I'm not going to get too detailed because I just want to make sure I get all the big areas down, and then I'll finish it up in another video. Just want to get the main areas down, not the details, and then I'll finish it up in another video. Not getting too particular here. Just throwing a little shading on his hand so that I can see the volume. Sometimes doing that really makes you see where there's some mistakes too. And I feel like this line is just too prominent. It's looking like he has a broken hand. So I'm just going to kick that back so that I can get it a little more curved. That looks a lot better. Make sure I get this line just right. I feel like my pencil is a little dull too. I should have started with sharpening it. Now I think, you know, the main area I want to get on his face is this very creepy eye that's kind of creeping out here. And it's right again, it starts right against the last finger, the pinky finger. And I just want to draw a little dark area. And make sure I don't get it too... So here's where you really have to pay attention to your measurements, because, boy, you know, you can tell when a facial feature is off more than almost any other part of the drawing. So I'm just kind of drawing that in there. I'm not getting too specific, but I am trying to get it right. I'm just trying to get the measurements right. I like his eyebrow, how it arches like that. I love this, how you can see the darkness of his pupil in there, even though the whole thing is dark. So I'm kicking that down a notch in value. Value meaning dark. And I'm looking at how close his nose is to the hand, and how his mouth kind of is turned down in despair. And he's got that kind of, oh, my aching head pose. This guy needs some Advil. And I'm just gonna get some of the hair in just so it can shape about how big I want his face to be by comparison to where his hair and skull are. So I'm just drawing in a few quick details there just to get the basic measurement of his head. He's got a nice crop too here. He doesn't have a lot of hair, which is kind of unusual. Usually Michelangelo's figures tend to have a lot of kind of curly hair. Maybe he's having a bad hair day too. A lot of things not going right for this guy. So I'm gonna darken this right here. And it's funny, he's got this little curly Q that I want to make sure I keep. And keep that dark there like that. And then where his hand is, I notice his face is quite dark, so I want to just darken all that. It'll help it to look more like the drawing. But boy, his finger here is quite light compared to what's going on behind it where it's really dark. So I want to capture that as well. There's where his hair would be behind the finger. So I think if you think in terms of where things intersect as opposed to this is what a finger looks like, it's a lot easier to draw because you're just forcing yourself to draw what you see as opposed to what you think a hand should look like and what you think lips should look like. You're really just drawing shapes. Getting his mouth a little bit open because that's what's making him look like with that despairing expression. Just comes down like this. Get a little shading in there. So it's pretty good. Now I want to really focus on this part because I feel like it's wimpy, and it's certainly not wimpy in the drawing. I feel like his shoulder might be a little bit off. There, I want to get him a little beefier, you know. So I'm also looking at where that creature intersects with the body, and it's kind of like this. Down to about here. What the heck is this thing? It's like a creepy bird thing. Kind of comes up like that, and then that little guy's head, the creepy head, is actually quite close to the elbow, so I've gotten something off a little bit here. So I'm gonna just draw it where it should be, and I'll correct everything else to kind of meet up with it. You have to be not afraid to correct your drawing as you go along, even if you like something about the line work or whatever it is. It's not worth it to preserve a line that you like to have the thing be off. So here's the creature's head, and I'm just going to get this general shape. I feel like that was a little too big. It's more like that. His leg. So I really separate that from him. So that's good. So it's probably been about a half hour, and I think we pretty much have the main gist of this down. And in the next video, we'll work on the details if you're interested to come back and check it out. So thanks so much for watching, and if you could subscribe to my channel, I'd appreciate it. If you'd like to see more of these, it gives me an idea of whether I should be doing more, if there's anybody out there. And if you give the video a like, I'd appreciate it. Also check out my Artwork by Mary page on Facebook, and that's M-A-R-I, Mary. And you can see my tutorials on a lot of oil painting tutorials, step by step, where I take pictures as I go along. so you can learn the process of how to do some basic oil painting. So thanks so much for joining, and I hope you come back and see another episode. Thanks.